Soccer Today is powered by Spin Media. From podcast to video production, visit spinmediadigitalsolutions.com and bring your content to the next level.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Dwayne Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, July 18th, 2022. I am Kevin Laramie, going solo today. Dwayne Rollins will join me tomorrow as we'll continue our coverage of the world of football with a soccer perspective, as I invite you to click on that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is growing. Thank you to join us on that journey to 1,000 subscribers and more on YouTube. Big show for you today. And if you're watching us via podcast, thank you. Well, if you're listening to us via podcast, thank you for subscribing and making this show a popular soccer podcast across the world. It is because of your great contribution to the show, and we appreciate your contribution to the show, subscribing, rating, reviews. It's always appreciated, and big show for you today as we look at the scores in Major League Soccer, as we also look in a tactical analysis of Marc-Anthony Kaye and Michael Bradley playing together. Yes, it's a very short sample size of data, but data suggests that something will have to give. We will have some great data on their partnership later in the show and dissecting their performance so far and how Michael Bradley and Marc-Anthony Kaye have been used since Marc-Anthony Kaye have joined Toronto FC. But first, let's start with our overview of results in Major League Soccer this weekend. Full slate of action in Major League Soccer, 14 games. When we started the weekend with a cracker of a game, Philadelphia, New England, big win for the Union, 2-1. They maintain their top spot in the Eastern Conference. We will break down the Eastern Conference standings later. Montreal, Toronto, big win for Montreal at home. We'll break down statistically that game later, as we will Toronto's midfield. Minnesota, DC United, another defeat for DC United. Big victory for Minnesota. Emmanuel Reynoso, an amazing performance once again. Over the last few weeks, I have to say, he might be the hottest player in Major League Soccer. Miami, Charlotte, weather delay, no problem. Pozuelo debuts as a Flamingo, and Miami overcomes a deficit and comes and wins it late in Miami. Yes, there was another weather delay in Miami, the second in Florida over the last few weeks. It is time for weather delays in Florida. It is the hottest, the muggiest place maybe in the northeastern hemisphere, and during July and August, that's the place you'll get weather delay in Major League Soccer. Chicago, Seattle, big win at home by Chicago. What's happening with Seattle? Brian Schmetzer mentioning a few times that his players will have to start playing better, even mentioning that, we have about 14 games left. Seems like a lot, but it's really not. Things have got to gel quickly for Seattle. Otherwise, their CONCACAF Champions League hangover might become their first non-playoff season since joining Major League Soccer in 2009. Colorado Rapids 2, LA Galaxy 0. The Galaxy are on a downward spiral, yes, clinging to the 7th spot and still in the playoff position. Colorado, big win at home for Robin Fraser and the Rapids. The season is not going according to plan, and they're already looking ahead into next year. But this win will galvanize the energy, and the advent of Ralph Priso gives maybe a bit more gel together in the midfield going forward. Maybe fits a bit more the system than Marc-Anthony Kaye. Is there a system that actually fits Marc-Anthony Kaye? Maybe Bob Bradley will need to adjust his to make sure that works. And yes, that's another tease for our segment later on the show as we continue to look at some great results in Major League Soccer. The Copa Tejas, the Cup of Texas, goes to Austin. With a 1-1 draw in Frisco, Texas, Austin went and lifted the Copa Tejas. Yes, it's a rivalry week. Dallas and Austin. Austin getting 1 point. And in the standings of them, Houston and Dallas, and the overall small tournament they have between each other, the Copa Tejas goes to Le Verde. Felicidades. Atlanta, Orlando, 1-1. Something had to give, but no. This is a moot point. Atlanta still struggling, still faced with a very big injury list. Orlando failing to find momentum, but staying afloat so far in the Eastern Conference. Nothing spectacular, but they're there. They're getting the small results, the point they need. We'll see if down the road they are. In what could be his last game for New York City FC, Tati Castellanos now rumored to go to Girona in Spain as quickly as later this week. He might be out of New York City. And yes, he might have scored his last goal ever for New York City FC against the Red Bull. Was New York blue? Was New York red? Tati said blue for maybe the last time. Valentin Castellanos at the 69th minute might have scored his last Major League Soccer goal. On his way to La Liga and Girona, it is part of the Manchester City Football Group. So is New York City FC. The offer apparently is there, and apparently New York City FC is not entertaining any other offer than the one from their sister club. Tati scored in a goodbye game. And that's a way to get out. That's a way to go out in a rivalry match. 3 points, important 3 points in the standings. You stay in front of your rival, and then you move on to Spain. He's 23 years old, and if he ever wants to make a move to Europe, it's now or never, because if he waits a bit too much, 23 is old for a prospect of soccer in Europe. You don't become a prospect at 23. You're supposed to dominate at 23. That is your prime period as a soccer player, 20 to 25 even. As a 17-year-old, you go to Europe and you're touted as a very highly good prospect. When you're 23, like Tati Castellanos heading to Europe, you're not necessarily a prospect. Can he deliver the merchandise? Can he deliver the goods? Can he be a goal scorer in La Liga? We will know that answer probably at the fall. Tati Castellanos on his way to La Liga in Spain, according to multiple reports from Tom Bogert to Jeffrey Carlisle to a ton of other people. By the way, the Shaq Moore trade, speaking of Jeffrey Carlisle, who actually reported that one with Drake Hills, Shaq Moore, Nashville trade is done. Montreal actually will have some money on the allocation. I think it's $50,000 because they had the discovery right of Shaq Moore, and Shaq Moore will now go to Nashville. We'll have more on that on another show, but if you will go to Live Life Drake on Twitter or Jeffrey Carlisle of ESPN FC on Twitter also, both reported that news earlier today as we continue to break down some of the results in Major League Soccer. The Battle of Ohio. I guess Ohio is yellow. It is good to be in yellow. Columbus 2, Cincinnati 0. Another great performance by Cucho Hernandez. 4 goals so far since joining the crew, and the crew are showing that things are becoming possible. Things are back in the right way. They are in a playoff position. Lucas Elarayan giving me a ton of points. He was my captain, finished the week with 48 points. Thank you very much, Uncle Lucas. Thank you very much. Cucho and Lucas, no, is not a Spanish cartoon. It should be. But Cucho and Lucas is the new name of the attack in Columbus. And so far, so good for Cucho. He has revitalized Lucas Elarayan. Keep both of those in your fantasy team going forward. Big performance, 17 shots, 4 on target for Columbus, 59% possession. It's going to be hard for Cincinnati without Lucho Acosta. Brendan Vasquez is not firing on all cylinders anymore, and they're finding himself under pressure without the ball, without accurate passes, and without proper pressure on the other team. Cincinnati being outplayed on the road in the Battle of Ohio. L is north, L is yellow. the hell is dominated by Columbus. Speaking of yellow, Nashville LAFC. We're going there. We're going to talk about Gareth Bale, and we're going to look at the results. By the way, if you're waiting for the Canadian review, Montreal-Toronto heat maps, after the break, we'll have a very intensive look at the Montreal and TFC match as we move on to Nashville versus LAFC. Debut for Gareth Bale at the 72nd minute. Yes, 100 passing accuracy. He had 10 overall passes for Gareth Bale. Those numbers are not that great when you look at the amount of shots for sure, but Gareth Bale, one of few players that could say he's a DP and heading into the World Cup with Wales, but Gareth Bale, good performance. He was used at the Carlos Vela spot in a 4-3-3. Not the Carlos Vela, the Arango spot as the middle striker in a 4-3-3 formation for Gareth Bale. Big win for LAFC. They are now back in the lead of the Supporters' Shield and back in the lead of the Western Conference standings. Now we will look in a few minutes at the end of the show, actually. So a big win here. Hani Mokhtar, penalty goal. It's pretty good. 13 shots, 3 on target, only for Nashville. LAFC, 13 shots, 5 on target. 50-50 the possession in this one. 16 crosses for Nashville, 5 for LAFC. Expected goal, very similar. 2 for Nashville, 1.6 for LAFC. When you round it out, it feels like a very similar game. But we can continue to break down some of the other results in MLS as we now look at Salt Lake, Kansas City. Big win for Salt Lake. Another big loss on Kansas City. The pressure is mounting, Peter. Oh, I know the owner said he's not going to do anything. He's never going to fire Peter Vermes. Firing Peter Vermes is not the answer. It is not the answer. It is not the truth. And I will preach. Listen to me. The answer, the truth, is in moving Peter up a few levels. Keep the other job. Sporting director, get the full title. Director of personnel, vice president, president. Get all the tags and the accolade. Manager needs to go to another one. It is time. It is 2022. The pressure is mounting. Kansas City is the laughingstock of Major League Soccer. San Jose 1, Houston 2. Big win for the Dynamo. But it's a futile result as both teams won't make the playoff. I said it here. Portland, Vancouver, big result as we start our Canadian review with the Vancouver-Portland review right now, right here on Soccer Today. I'm Kevin Laramie, by the way, if you're just joining us live. Portland, Vancouver, 1-1. Felipe Mora tied it up at the 82nd minute when Brian White actually scored the opening goal in this one. An adventure it was at Portland. Brian White, 32nd minute, he scored his opening goal. What I thought was interesting here is, yes, the XG is a little bit higher on Portland's side, 2.3 versus 1.7 for Vancouver. The crosses, though, and that could be dangerous going forward. 26 crosses for Portland, 12 for Vancouver. This is an area that they need to not get beat too much because one of those days will cost them a result. Passing accuracy 85 to 74. Those are low numbers when we look at 74 for Vancouver. Same as the possession. Vancouver does not play a possession-based game, especially with the lineup that they did show. It was the 3-4-3, the 3-4-2-1, the 3-4-1-2, depending of how they handle the ball, if God stays back. But you see this iteration of that match. This was versus Portland. It says Cincinnati, but as a little Easter egg. When we look at Blackman, Veselinovic, Nerwinski, we had Isaac Bomer. Yeah, that's a Freudian slip. Isaac Bomer in net. Ryan Raposo. Kubas was back in the lineup. Russell Tybert, Christian Daume on the right side this week, left side last week. Brian White back in the starting 11, taking Pedro Vite's place from the last game. Ryan Gauld back in the midfield position, and Lucas Cavallini used a little bit on the left on that one and able to get some of the job done. But for Vancouver, a 1-1 draw, not a bad result against Portland. It is a rival in the Western Conference, but at this point, Vancouver find themselves in a pretty good situation, in a pretty good standing situation. Here it is, the standings in the Western Conference. just a point away from the playoff, but it's very tight. It is a marathon, but a couple points separates Vancouver from the 6th spot. 7th spot is only 1 point away. Vancouver has one more game played, though. That's where the Galaxy have the advantage in the Western Conference standings. As we now continue our review of Major League Soccer, after the break we will have Montreal-Toronto, the statistics, all the breakdown, and everything you need to know. Is Michael Bradley and Marc-Anthony Kaye a viable partnership in the midfield of Toronto? We will look at the data, we will look at amazing graphics that we have ready for you after the break, and after a few words from our sponsor today, Spin Media Digital Solutions. If you are a content creator and you want to bring your visual graphics, your game, your audio levels, your overall production values to the next level, contact us at spinmediadigitalsolutions.com, and together we can work and make your show to the next level. We'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Laramie with you today. Show presented by SpinMediaDigitalSolutions.com as we continue our look at some of the great results in Major League Soccer. It was Heineken Rivalry Week, and one of the biggest rivalries in Major League Soccer is Montreal-Toronto. First meeting in Major League Soccer this year between the two. They have met previously in the Canadian Championship. In the semifinal of the Canadian Championship, Toronto did a big result at home at BMO Field against Montreal, a spanking Toronto's A team at that moment, with Montreal's B team, to be quite honest, but a bit spanking of 4-0 by Toronto to Montreal last month led to a revenge type of situation, type of scenario at Stade Saputo, and Montreal got the job done. Only one goal difference, only a 1-0 victory, even though Montreal did get a red card in this one. Here are your statistics to start this show as we take one more second to celebrate our Patreons right here. From Sean to Glad to Dennis and Danielle, thank you for being amazing Patreons, and more content will continue to be put out on our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes, and you'll find right now the latest edition of the Two Solitudes podcast, where Dwayne and I talk about the Canadian soccer business and Canada Soccer and the association and the entire controversy that's been happening over the last couple weeks. Dwayne and I break it all down and give our thoughts on the entire ordeal. You can find the show at patreon.com/sports podcast /2 solitudes. That's the new address, patreon.com/2 solitudes, as we now talk about Montreal, Toronto. Let's go. It's time. Big win for the Montrealers, 1-0 at Stade Saputo on July 16th. An own goal by Lucas McNaughton. Yes, it was credited to Lucas McNaughton, but that's all Romel Kyoto. Romel Kyoto created that goal. He got the XG for the goal. He got the job done once again, Romel Kyoto. And Kai Kamara could have scored a couple times. Still stuck at 133, one away from 134 and the third spot in MLS history. It is Jeff Cunningham right now, and he's so close, Kai Kamara, and he almost scored. Still hasn't scored at Stade Saputo, by the way, for Kai Kamara. Lucas McNaughton, own goal at 69th minute. A red card for Kamal Miller at the 81st minute. It was his second yellow card, and that is the reason why he was ejected. He will be suspended for the game on the road by Montreal next Saturday. They will be in DC, Washington DC. Maybe Wayne Rooney's first game in charge of DC United will be against CF Montreal. Montreal had 19 shots, 5 on target, 64% possession, 86% passing accuracy, 4 clearances versus 27 for Toronto. Toronto was under pressure. That is why you see a big disparity. Montreal scored only once and its own goal. You could say that, they didn't deserve the win. Expected goal would like to defer the situation to something very different. They disapprove. They think Montreal should have scored a couple. And Toronto's like 0.3. That's the second game in a row Toronto has a 0.3 expected goal. And I have to say one thing. To get a 0.3 expected goal, you gotta be really, really bad, because 0.3 expected goal is basically a shot that is on target properly, just a little bit out of reach. Just that is 0.3. Means you barely got one good shot on target that was dangerous in the entire game. And that is pretty shameful. Toronto has the third worst defense in the entire league. It is a bad result, and we'll look at how they set up. But now it's been 2 games that Bob Bradley has tried to use Marc-Anthony Kaye and Michael Bradley in a midfield situation together. And I'm not convinced they can be used together. One of my arguments is the results has been poor. 2 defeats, 2-0 midweek against Chicago, 1-0 against Montreal on Saturday. It was never really an offensive threat by anybody in there. And I don't care you have Insigne, Bernadeschi, and Jesus up top. You can have Jesus, Lorenzo, and Federico up top. If the ball doesn't get there, if your midfielder plays too deep, they're not going to get the scoring chances. In the 4-3-3, they'll be exposed and they'll be eaten on the flanks. Let's look at one of my important finds over the last few weeks. I think it's fascinating to see this. Let's look at how to share the midfield between Marc-Anthony Kaye and Michael Bradley. Heat maps from last weekend. So, it ain't a sexy performance in the midfield by TFC in either games, I have to say. But to me, what I find interesting, and I will direct your attention to the middle of both soccer field if you're watching us via video. If you're watching us, if you're listening to us via podcast, I will do my best to describe it. Maybe go into the podcast and the video feed on YouTube. Look for the 22nd minute or so. You'll find the graphic. The graphic here, you see more touches by both players in their own zone and both middle and the left of it. There's a pretty big overlap. They're stepping on each other's toes, not finding a way to make the ball progress into dangerous attacking areas. In a 4-3-3 type of midfield with Marc-Anthony Kaye and LAFC with Bob Bradley, it was very similar as touches, a bit more like Michael Bradley. So Marc-Anthony Kaye's heat maps when he was playing with LAFC, and maybe I should have that on another show, it was very similar to Michael Bradley. How can you use both at the same time for TFC? I don't know. Is it possible? Let's see. Let's break down TFC's lineup. It was a version of their lineup of a 3-4-3. Over the last 3 games, they played a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3, and now a 3-4-3. All games were not spectacular by TFC, let's face it. With a change in net for Toronto, Bono was in net instead of Conte Westberg. So that's an interesting change of scenery for the goalkeeper situation. In their 3-man backline, Criscito, Shane O'Neill, Lucas McNaughton. Shane O'Neill, a pretty good performance once again. He is a pretty good defender. Maybe my only shining light in Toronto 1.0 in 2022, 2.0 when Federico and Lorenzo joined Jesus up top. And of course, Luka McNaughton playing well, but scoring his own net. Officially, it wasn't really that. It was probably more Kyoto conversation here. Lucas Petrasso used as a left attacking midfielder in a 4-person back line. Michael Bradley and Marc-Anthony Kaye in the middle, sharing the time of midfield play. Without a lot of success, by the way. And Kosi Thompson was the right midfielder. Looking at the attacking trident in this 3-4-3, Jesus Jimenez to the left because of injuries and, of course, a few suspensions by Toronto. Akinola having a start as the striker of a 3-person attacking line. DeAndre Kerr was the right attacking player in a 3-4-3. So now that we see this, and I'll remind you the midfield situation here, the heat map. Can they share the midfield successfully? Can Michael Bradley and Mark Anthony Kaye share that midfield with success? I am not convinced they can, and I think it's something that will be needed to be done. When we look at the standings in the Eastern Conference, Toronto is, well, let's look right now. Toronto's pretty far down. They're like they're 13th with 19 points in 21 games played. Not even a point per game average. Pretty bad. The season is a bust, okay? Let's call a spade a spade. I think they're too far down. Yes, it's only 8 points. You're right, and you go on a run, and maybe a team in front of you will go on a run. That's true. And maybe that it's not as big as a hole as I make it seem, and maybe Lorenzo, Federico, Jesus find something that we don't see right now. But that will be needed, because that's what's needed right now for Toronto. And if you don't find a way quickly to get victories and have a healthy lineup, and Pozuelo and Federico are available, it'll be very difficult for Toronto to make the playoffs, which means they're playing for next year. And that's interesting. Now on the Montreal side, Kamal Miller did get a red card in this one. Let's just go back and see the statistics as we move on. We were saying Montreal 19 shots, 5 on target, a high possession rate from Montreal. At some point in the game, it went all the way to 69 to go back to 64. A good performance by Montreal, a deserved victory. It could have been better offensively. Kyle Kamara missed a few shots. A surprise start by Kyle Kamara, who was used instead of Mason Toye at the attacking duo of a 3-4-1-2. Matko Miljevic was your starting midfielder in the number 10 role. And Georgi Mihailovic came back from injury. He was absent since May 28th with a ankle injury. He's now back playing. He came into the second half at the 60th minute, played 30 minutes, added 3 created chances for Mihailovic. Kamal Miller, 2 yellow card, and will miss the game against DC United. So big win for Montreal. Let's now look at the Eastern Conference standings before we move on today's show. Once again, the top of the East, Philadelphia is still number 1 with 39 points, followed closely by NYCFC. But NYCFC have a game in hand. They won't have Tati anymore, but so far they have been able to replace their players. And here are words I never thought I would say. Hebert has come back and made quite a good impression so far. He has been successful when used in replacement of Tati Castellanos. We'll see if Hebert can be the solution for NYCFC. If not, it's still time to get another player and still keep some profits for NYCFC. New York is third to Red Bull with 33 points after 21 games. Montreal fourth, 32 points, 20 games played for Montreal. Orlando is fifth with 30 points after 21 games played. Columbus sixth, back in a playoff position for Columbus. The Crew are now back into contention and in the conversation for the top teams in the Eastern Conference, at least the top 7. And Cincinnati wraps up the playoff position with the 7th spot, 27 points in 21 games, 1 in front of Charlotte that is now 8th. Miami is 9th, and the Revolution are 10th, couple points behind Cincinnati in the Eastern Conference. And that is your standing so far in the East. As we now look also at LA's performance at LA, Austin, and Philly, but more LA and Austin. To me, that's going to be a conversation for the Supporter Shield this season in Major League Soccer. As now I want to talk about one last game before we say goodbye today. Miami-Charlotte was a weather delay, but it finished, it continued, and Pozuelo made his debut for the Flamingos. He was in the starting 11 against Charlotte, and Charlotte took a 2-0 lead. On the road, Yuri Reyna scored at the first minute and the 42nd minute. It was 2-0. But the Flamingos said, no, here we go. We are the Flamingos. And it's 3-2. Robert Taylor, do not call me Bobby Tay, but Bobby Tay scored at the 59th minute to cut it back to 1. And then Gonzalo, a couple burgers in, Higuain, came at the 72nd minute and tied it up. Emerson Rodriguez emerging this season in Major League Soccer. It was his 13th game this season, and he scored at the 90th +3 to give the Flamingos all 3 points. And like I mentioned in this one, Pozuelo made his debuts with the Flamingos, and here are a couple of statistics. He was subbed off, but it was a 96th minute, quite a handsome performance by the former TFC designated player. He had a 92% passing accuracy in a total passes of 60, 88 touches, 3 created chances for Alejandro Pozuelo, 1 shot, but it was on target for Pozuelo. Good performance, and it might be enough chance, but if you are a betting person and you have good odds for Miami to be a playoff team, with Pozuelo and Campagna, and if they find ways to be able to play well together, you might be able to find something quite interesting for Miami. They could be a spoiler in the Eastern Conference. On that note, I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Kev Larame, this show at Soccer Today. Dwayne at 24th Minute. Dwayne will be back tomorrow on the show as we continue our coverage of the world of soccer, with the world of football, with a soccer perspective. Of course, you can find the podcast version of this show everywhere you find your podcasts. And if you'd like to support this show financially and get access to the Two Solitudes podcast, a no-holds-barred Canadian soccer show focused on the Canadian men's national team, the road to Qatar, and more, you can find it on our Two Solitudes podcast page, which is available at patreon.com/2solitudes. Tonight, Canada, United States, the final of the W Championship, 10 p.m. on One Soccer. We'll break it down tomorrow. The winner qualifies for the Olympic. The runner-up will qualify for the second chance Olympic qualifying process. But as always, for Dwayne Rollins, who will be back tomorrow, I am Kev Larame, and we wish you a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.